Hey, what's up, everybody? Michael from RogueDeckBuilder.com here, doing another Deck Tech Doctor episode. Getting quite a few more of these, thanks to everyone who's been sending in their decks. I put a post on the Rogue Deck Builder subreddit on Reddit.com, so if you guys haven't subscribed to that subreddit on Reddit.com, if you have a Reddit account and you want to interact more with the Rogue Deck Builder community, definitely go check that out and subscribe to it, and you can check out my post and send me your decks if you want them. If you want a video done on them. So this deck is brought to us by Irons on Reddit, and just very cool idea. I always love enchantments, and Heroic's definitely a type of deck that I want to build something around. It's a little bit harder in the current standard format, just with so much removal. There's so many ways to sort of disrupt a lot of synergistic styles of decks, which is why there's not that many out there. You have decks like Mono Black and Black White Devotion that just have straight up powerful cards like Thoughtseize, Blood Barons, and things like that. You got Green Red or Jund Monsters that again has just cards that are by themselves much stronger. Pelucranos is good by himself. Storm Breath Dragon is good by himself. You got awesome Planeswalkers that do a whole bunch of work within the deck. And, you know, I was talking to one of my friends who was trying to work on a very synergistic deck. She was building an Is It deck around Scry and things like that. And every single card in there had a very cool idea. But the problem was they require other cards to be able to have them work, which in current standard right now I don't think is something that's really that viable. I'm sure it can be done, but if you want to be pretty consistent with your wins and things like that, I don't think a synergistic deck is the way to go. If you look at all the top tier decks, they just play straight up individual powerful cards, which is why I think that decks like Heroic and stuff like that aren't exactly coming up right now. But they're extremely fun to play, and I'm definitely looking forward to building my own. And this deck got my gears going in my head, and I'm already starting to think of some awesome ways to sort of build a Heroic deck. And Black White is one of my favorite color combinations, along with White Blue. So maybe I'll try and make an Esper Heroic deck or something like that. Who knows? We'll see that where that goes. So I think the description is a little bit outdated in this. I don't know if he updated it or not, because he has Stab Wound in the description, but there is no Stab Wound in the actual deck. So I'm not exactly sure. It was last updated 1 day ago, so I'm sure this description's just outdated. That's all. So one thing I noticed is there's a lot of random one-ofs in the deck. One Read the Bones, one Glimpse of the Sun God, and one Here's Downfall. Okay, maybe there's not a lot of one-ofs, but those are pretty prominent one-ofs. Mainly because I don't feel that they do much in the deck, and I feel, if you want removal, Hero's Downfall is just a premium removal spell that I think you should, at minimum play 2 if you're going to be playing it. I would probably switch these numbers around, 3 Hero's Downfall and 1 Doomblade if I were going to, if I wanted to stick to just these 2 removal spells. It's a little bit different. It's more of a meta call. With Jund and Green Red Monsters coming up, if you find you're playing a lot more against those types of decks, you're obviously going to want Doomblade over Hero's Downfall a lot. It's just a little bit more efficient while still doing the same thing. Of course, the one downside of playing against Green Red Monsters and stuff like that is they have Domries, they have sometimes Garruk, sometimes Xenagos, and Here's Downfall takes care of those pretty easily. But normally I would say that would be an argument to just keep 4 or 3 Here's Downfall in. But because you have so much evasion in your deck, you have Gift of Resolve for flying, and things like that, and you already have inherent, flying creatures that are just have inherent evasion over them. I don't think that you really need to have a lot of Hero's Downfall, and I would just play Doomblade against Green Red Monsters and stuff like that just for the sake of efficiency. But it's sort of hard to say. Even with if Jund Monsters gets a little bit bigger, getting rid of Reaper of the Wilds and things like that might be an option to play Hero's Downfall a little bit more. But you could also just go an even split, 2-2. That probably won't be such a terrible idea as well. One Glimpse of the Sun God I found was a little bit random. I know you're looking for evasion, but I find the thing with heroic decks is they are pretty bursty, and they can generally win in a couple of turns just bashing their opponent in. And inherently, once you get your enchantments on and your heroic triggers off, your creatures are just naturally going to be larger than your opponent's creatures. Even green red monsters with heroic, if you get the right draws and things like that, you're generally going to be bigger than them. And again, with Gift of Orzhov, it just gives you so much access to evasion, and the only creature that can really deal with Gift of Orzhov on a Agent of the Fates, or pretty much any one of your creatures is Stormbreath Dragon, and even then, unless it's a monstrous Stormbreath Dragon, it's going to have quite a hard time dealing with a 5/5 or a 6/6 or a 7/7, a Crone Skyguard or something like that. Excuse me. So that is I don't think you really need this type of evasion when you already have access to a lot of it. Plus, with Agent of the Fates and Doomblades and removal, you're playing in a color combination that just has access to so much straight removal that I don't think you really need the Glimpse of the Sun God. And I think making more room for an extra Hero's Downfall or another threat is a little bit better way to go. And I just don't think it's really needed. It does get heroic triggers off. I could see it working pretty well with Agent of the Fates and stuff like that. But I think that might be more of a testing call. On paper, I would prefer to just have straight up, more removal or something like that, or another heroic trigger, something like that. But let me know how it works out for you. Again, with these videos, I'm not a final say. Absolutely not. These are just all my personal opinions, and these are just what I would do when building a deck. Just so it gives you more options. That's the thing that I think is the most important thing to take away from these videos is I'm doing these just to give another eye on the deck mostly. Then it allows you to have just a better view of the deck, and once you actually do test it, you know these cards I suggested, and you can maybe test them out and see if they work out for you. So I like your creature set. There's a few of them that I'm not really sure of. Like, in my opinion, I would rather play a Soldier of the Pantheon over Tormented Hero. And that's the one thing. Like, even playing a heroic deck and stuff like that. Or an aggro deck or something like that, I would prefer to play permanents that do a little bit more, I guess, is the way to go. You are like you don't want to get restricted by heroic or whatever, and you only have 2 heroic creatures or 3 heroic creatures, and in my opinion, the most prominent ones that you should be keeping are Crone Skyguard and Agent of the Fates. Agent of the Fates just works really well in the creature-based matchups, Crone Skyguard as well, even in the creature-based matchups, and has a lot of evasion, can get really big really fast. And Tormented Hero, I would rather have Soldier of the Pantheon, because the effect it has is a little bit better. You still get some life gain out of it, and it adds another form of evasion. So, like, playing against Jund monsters where they have, if they have the Reaper of the Wilds or something like that out there, Tormented Hero isn't going to do anything, and you have to pump it out quite large to actually be able to get through Reaper of the Wilds. Soldier of the Pantheon allows you to just swing through it and not have to worry about it. It also works pretty well in combat math when if you're playing against green red monsters and they play a Gore Clan Rampager, if they miscalculated that one life you gain from playing Gore Clan Rampager, it could allow you to come back. It's always a possibility. Soldier of the Pantheon just opens you up to a little bit more things while the game's going on. And even in the control matchup, it's protected from Detention Sphere and things like that, whereas Tormented Hero isn't. And you're still naturally getting a 2/1 body for it. So, in my opinion, I would rather have Soldier of the Pantheon over Tormented Hero. But your deck, your call. Let's see, what else? Read the Bones. Read the Bones was an interesting one. I don't agree with having just one of. These types of cards, they don't work well as one of. That's the thing. I think 2 of is the minimum for these types of cards. Especially playing a heroic deck where a lot of your damage is going to be pretty bursty when you just sort of cast your evasion cards, whether it be like God's Willing or something like that. Pump your guy up for a turn. You'll get him extra +2 or +3/+3. Swing through for 6, 7, 8 damage. and be able to beat down your opponent that way. Being able to work around your draws is very, very important. And I would probably, if I wanted to include Read the Bones, I would probably grab 2 of them, possibly 3, depending on how fast or slow you want your deck to be. And with Gift of Orzhov and things like that, the life loss, it really isn't that prominent. But you could also go the opposite direction. Like you mentioned in the description, you want card draw and stuff like that possibly. But you could go also the opposite route and work more card disadvantage. So how that would work is, you'd have cards like Sin Collector and Thoughtseize and Duress, even in the main board. Like those are cards that I think, maybe not Sin Collector, of course, but like Duress and Thoughtseize, like I think they're main boardable cards. There's always generally something to hit, especially with more Planeswalkers coming out in decks. Duress hits them, and I think that's pretty important. I don't think your deck works extremely well against certain Planeswalkers. I mean, your deck is more having like 2 or 3 creatures out maybe, and they usually have just enchantments loaded up on them, things like that. And Kiora works really well against those decks. And especially when all of your creatures are going to be quite large, a Planeswalker such as Elspeth could potentially be quite a large blowout against your deck. So that's just something to consider. I think in these types of decks where card draw isn't overly important. It's one of those things where it's nice, but I don't think in these types of decks it's where you're being a lot more proactive and you're not trying to look, you're not looking really for too many answers, more just threats to play out. I feel that having card draw isn't as relevant, but hindering your opponent is a little bit more, just because your deck has many more ways that can be answered, and you have less ways that you can actually answer your opponent's decks, which I think is something to consider. Also, one thing to note on land, I know you probably already know, and I'm sure this is just a budget or a collection concern, but just play the what are they called? I can't remember, the black-white shocklands, whatever they're called. You already have the Temple of Silences. Godless Shrine. That's what they're called. Get 4 Godless Shrine. Being able to play your things on time is just extremely important. And again, the life loss is not relevant at all. I don't think I have too much to say about creatures and stuff. Honestly, it looks pretty fine to me. Of course, other than, Tormented Hero and stuff like that. I mean, there's a couple of different... So the creature base seems pretty good to me. These types of decks are hard to sort of judge on paper. It probably comes down more to testing, and it really depends on what type of deck you're playing against. But I'm going to here at the top. You can see all the suggestions I have for the deck, and a lot of them are sideboard options. But again, it's up to you if you actually want to include them in your deck. Because, cards such as, like, Nyxborn, Shieldmate, and stuff like that, I could see them working quite well with cards such as Ethereal Armor, but I could see them also just sort of being dead draws and not really doing much in your deck. So it goes along with what I've been saying with just with how standard is right now, and playing more permanents that actually do stuff, have effects when they enter the battlefield or things such as that. But I mean, you are playing a heroic deck. But I think, again, the only 2 big heroic cards you really need in this deck are Crone Skyguard and Agent of the Fates. I think those just are perfectly fine heroic cards. So the first card we're going to look at is Sin Collector. Of course, this might be just more of a sideboard option against the blue-white control matchup. Main reason why I prefer it over something like Duress is because you can... Duress you can play turn 1, of course, turn 2. Sin Collector at least adds another threat to the board, and I think just pressuring your opponent to actually, play Supreme Verdict or something a turn or 2 earlier than they would like is actually pretty prominent, and it just allows you to play another threat, and it's another source of damage, while still having access to it. But another thing that's important about Sin Collector is, since a lot of blue-white control decks and things like that play Elixir of Immortality now, and they expect the game to go longer, it allows you to take a card, whether it be Sphinx's Revelation or something like that, or Supreme Verdict, and get it out of the game completely, which it allows them, if the game does go long, it's one less answer they have, and that could potentially help you get back in the game if they have to blow that Elixir of Immortality a lot sooner than they would like. They don't have access to get that Supreme Verdict or that Elspeth or any of those cards back in their hand. Sorry, not this card doesn't hit Elspeth, but Supreme Verdict or Sphinx's Revelation are pretty much the most important cards to hit when you're playing this type of deck. Blind Obedience was a card that I think could replace something like Glimpse of the Sun God. It's a little bit more passive, and same with a card such as Imposing Sovereign. These two cards sort of do a similar thing as Glimpse of the Sun God. It doesn't do it in a short term, but over long term it allows you to grind out your opponent a little bit more and sneak through an extra attack or two over the course of multiple turns, rather than being a little bit more bursty and doing just one wave of attack, which could potentially not kill your opponent. Because you have so many large beatdown creatures, I think getting those creatures in for an extra attack over the course of multiple turns is a little bit better in my opinion than just doing one turn and having to have this card wait in your hand. That's the main thing. You don't want to have a lot of cards that you're waiting on. Glimpse of the Sun God is something that if you want to wait for a final attack, you have to choose whether you want to pump up your guys or make them sacrifice creatures or something like that, or just tap down all their creatures. Imposing Sovereign and Blind Obedience sort of work a little bit better in the sense that they're a little bit more passive. Imposing Sovereign also adds another threat to the board. Blind Obedience allows you to extort over the course of the game, so you're still grinding out a little bit more damage each time. And they also just work really well against haste creatures, whereas Glimpse of the Sun God does not. It forces you to pay the mana and use up a card to actually stop, a Stormbreath Dragon or other haste creatures, Ash Zealot, what have you. It also is a one-time trick pony, whereas Blind Obedience and Imposing Sovereign generally stay on the board for multiple turns. Boon of Erebos is a card that I think works just awesomely in a heroic deck with any black in it. It's just a nice, easy trick. And tricks are something that you don't see too much in Standard anymore, and I feel, especially playing a heroic deck, adding more tricks in is sort of the route to go, honestly, because their effect is quite strong, and getting extra 2 damage in or saving yourself from a Supreme Verdict or something like that is very, very prominent, and I think it's a nice main board spell, because in your main board you absolutely have no way of protecting yourself from Wrath effects or a lot of removal. And you have Rootborn defenses in the sideboard and things like that, but in the main board, Boon of Erebos does a little bit more, and again, the life loss isn't relevant. Plus, it allows you to use your mana a little bit more efficiently. Just being 1 mana instant speed allows you to save a creature, pump up a creature, activate heroic, and do a whole bunch of different things all at once. And where you're playing an aggressive deck, every single point of damage is very, very important. And so the extra +2 you get can be quite effective. And it also allows you to just do a whole bunch more, in my opinion. And even when you're attacking, it allows you to win trades without having to worry about your creature dying, which is, again, very prominent. Last Breath is a card that I think can potentially be a good main board removal spell. There's always stuff to hit, especially with cards such as Courser of Crufix being so prominent now. It's a very, very important card you don't want to get out of hand. Allows you to exile it. It hits Master of Waves, Nightfall Specters, a lot of the important cards that you really don't want to stay on the field. You're allowed to get rid of it at instant speed and things like that. You mentioned, Stab Wound for your removal for these types of cards, but having Last Breath allows you to do a little bit more, and you can do it on their turn rather than wait till your turn. It seems like you since removed Stab Wounds. I don't think I have to really worry about talking about it too much, but that's just something to mention about that. It's just a really good removal spell. Not much to say about that, and it may have some fringe situations where you last breath one of your own guys to save yourself from one last attack or something like that. Or if you an even more fringe situation with heroic, it allows you to target one of your own creatures with heroic if they're a 2/2 or something like that, and you need that like 1 extra damage to kill your opponent. You can target your own guy, make him a 3/3, and the last breath will actually fizzle, and it won't go off. You won't get the 4 life, but you'll get the extra counter to kill your opponent off. Very, very rare, but it's just another thing that has a possibility of happening, and those are still things that you need to consider when making a deck. Lifebane Zombie, very just an awesome card. This card is going to be, black is even starting to mainboard some of these in certain decks, and it works really well against green or white-based decks. Even in the control-based matchup, it's a large threat that doesn't get hit by things such as Last Breath. So it's and hitting your opponent for 3 damage a turn is definitely a threat that's needing to be answered. And because you have enchantments and things like that, you can just equip some enchantments on Lifebane Zombie, make it a 5/2 or 5/3. That is very tough for an opponent to handle, and even in the green-red matchups, they can't block it. And it also, you can rip a card from their hand and possibly get rid of it, which saves you a lot of trouble when you're not mainboarding a lot of removal. High Priest of Penance is a card that I actually really like, and I think has a place since green-red monsters is becoming more prominent, and there's a lot of creature-based decks now coming up, and decks such as mono black and things like that are falling a little bit more behind. They're switching a little bit more over to black-white, but it allows you to kill off anything. That's the main thing. It's another answer to Planeswalkers, which is something that's really prevalent in your deck when you don't have too many answers to Planeswalkers. And it has the same effect that Sedge Scorpion does in Limited, where it can pretty much roadblock your opponent, and when it works really well against any creature-based matchups when they're really trying to protect their own threats. And yours is a simple 1/1 that can just chump block while taking out that creature that you blocked, killing off one of their planeswalkers, killing off one of their important enchantments, anything of that sort. Hits any non-land permanent, and other than Blood Baron and things like that, or anything that has protection. But I think it's a really nice answer, and it's actually pretty cool because if you happen to just load up enchantments on it, and you can use it to block, and it's whenever it's dealt damage. So what this allows you to do is you can block lower, you can beef it up to a 3/3 or 4/4. Block a 2/2 or 3/3, it still activates this and allows you to keep High Priest of Penance around. So it's just there's probably not many situations where you do that, but since you have better targets to use heroic on, but it's just another option you have when you're playing a deck with a lot of enchantments and things like that. Zathra Necromancer, I think, is a card. You're playing quite a few humans, actually. Tormented Hero, Agent of Fate, Sakron Skyguard, Nyxborn Shieldmate, things like that, and it allows you to have a little bit more staying power on the board as well. And it's another way to get around Verdict and things like that. And plus adding another threat on the board. So it's something to consider, and it's another option if you're playing High Priest of Penance as well, since High Priest is another human, Imposing Sovereign's another human, Soldier of the Pantheon's another human, and Fate Unraveler, oh, never mind, Fate Unraveler's a hag, never mind. It's another possible option that you can run in your deck. I don't know what you'd replace in it. I personally like Spiteful Return, actually. But I'm not sure running 4 is absolutely needed. Possible cut down on a couple of Heralds. It's always a possibility. You can always choose if you want to cut down some of the instants and stuff like that and play more threats. You could also cut down on some of the enchantments. I don't think you need to play 3 Ethereals and 3 Gifts. Play 2 of each, maybe. I feel, putting all your eggs in one basket isn't a great way to do things, and you already have enough bestow creatures that they add to the enchantment count, essentially. since a lot of the time, spiteful returns you're going to be playing as a bestow creature, or at least I would. I don't know. Maybe you play the deck differently. Fate Unraveler is an interesting card. I thought it might be alright to include in blue-white control matchup. It is something they have to answer. You can play it after they wrath if you're like on the draw or something like that. And it slowly grinds out the opponent, still being a 3/4, so it still smacks them in the face for 3 damage. And it hurts them a lot more if they want to try and Sphinx's Revelation. They have to get rid of Fate Unraveler first. The card draw is the most important thing, of course, but still, it still affects it. And when you're playing an aggressive deck, it helps keep their life total down. So that is something to consider. It also negates the life gain that they sometimes gain, green-red, from Courser of Crewfix, things like that. And still being a 3/4 body, even playing against, Blue-White Devotion or something like that, you can block a lot of their creatures, elemental tokens or things of that sort. It's of course more of a testing card, but it's an enchantment creature as well, so it does work with ethereal armor. But again, those things are just more side notes to consider. And we already went over Soldier of the Pantheon. If you want to make your deck a little bit faster in general, you could possibly just take out some cards and keep Tormented Hero in and add in another 1-drop. That's always a possibility as well. So Obzidot and Bloodbaron of his scope, I think, are just extremely powerful cards in a lot of decks. In any Orzhov deck, really. Especially Obzidot, if you resolve that in a control-based matchup. More often than not, you'll have a better time winning the game, just because it's an extremely hard card to answer. And having another 5/5 on the field with haste every time it comes in, potentially smacking a control player in the face for 7 points of damage each turn it comes in. Bloodbaron Viscopa also works really well against those mirror matches or any black or white based matchup. Having the ability to not get hit by a lot of removal, a lot of that spot removal that goes around, works really well. Of course, you probably wouldn't bring it in decks such as Green Red Monsters or things like that, but it also just allows you to work a lot more around spot removal, and it's definitely a harder card to answer when you're playing against mono black or black white control. It has the downside, of course, you can't target it with Ethereal Armor or Gift of Orzhova, or even God's Willing, but it just inherently, because it's just a powerful card by itself, I think that's a minor downside. But yeah, those are all the cards I feel that are pretty good options. Even some of them in the sideboard, it's always a possibility. Comes down more of a meta call, I guess. It really depends on what types of decks you're playing against. Not really sure about a lot of these maybe boards. Arcane of Thune's a really strong card. I think it works really well. You do have the life gain to do a lot of things with it, so I think that's a possibility of including. Deathray Shaman I don't think really has a spot in your deck. You don't really have any ways of getting land cards in your graveyard, so you can't mill. You can't ramp with it, so that's a really big downside. You can exile cards from the graveyard and deal 2 damage and gain 2 life, but I feel when you're making your creatures already naturally big and beating down your opponent that way, it's 2 damage isn't that relevant. Grey Merchant, that's a possibility for like a finisher or something like that, but again, since a lot of your stuff is very susceptible to wrath and removal, and you have like no underworld connections to have some extra devotion on the side, I don't think I would play Grey Merchant. You're going to be using your creatures. If you're not winning with your creatures, then I think you need to change some things around. But Grey Merchant, I think, doesn't really have a place in your deck. Oh, you already had Imposing Sovereign in your maybe board. Well, I already talked about that, so don't really need to go into it anymore. Painseer is a little bit tough to say. A very, very underpowered card, I think. It's a Dark Confidant wannabe, and again, I think playing more prominent permanents is the way to go. You know, cards that do a little bit more than Pain Seer. Over the course of the game, of course, Pain Seer is going to be very good. I think in the blue-white control matchup is I think a fine spot to put it in, but other than that, I don't think I really see Pain Seer working in any other matchup very well. It's not very big. It doesn't do anything else. It requires you to actually attack, since you have no other way to tap it other than one copy of Glimpse of the God. So you might get one or two activations off before, you know, green-red monsters or other decks just have larger creatures than Pain Seer can handle. So I think being able to do it in a blue-white control matchup is a little bit better, since you can actually freely attack with it pretty much almost every turn, and it's something you have to answer, otherwise you'll keep up your card advantage. Freaker's Cure is a little bit pushed out now since Bioblight came into the format, and I think Bioblight is just generally the better card. So I wouldn't bother including it if you have Bioblight already in your deck. Ring Flush as well, you don't really need it. It of course hits, you know, Master Waves, but that's pretty much it. I mean, there's not really any other things that you wouldn't rather just have, you know, Here's Downfall or Doomblade for, or Devour Flesh or Ultimate Price, which I think are cards you should include if you are wanting to run a little bit more removal type stuff. But yeah, that's what I have to say about the deck. Very cool idea. I always love aggro decks, and black-white is especially a very fun aggro color combination I want to try out making for myself. And you have some very cool card choices that I think I'll have to try out in my versions of the deck as well. So you definitely got my brain going to thinking about some of the deck ideas for myself. So very cool idea. I'm really looking forward to seeing where it goes. If you don't change anything, that's perfectly fine. Let me know how this version goes, and if you happen to include some of my my suggestions, then feel free to let me know how those go as well. But thank you, Irons, for sending in your deck. Keep sending in those decks, guys. I have a small list, so it's pretty much just first come, first serve, and I'll just keep going through them as I come across them. But other than that, thank you guys for watching. Be sure to check out the main Rogue Deck Builder channel. The link will be in the description below. Check out our Facebook page as well, and be sure to keep up to date on the main Rogue Deck Builder channel, which will also be in the description below. Check out all of those guys, and thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.